Hello everyone, and welcome to another Top 5 Records video and another one in the series Mono versus Stereo, in which I'm trying to determine which version of a particular album is better. And today I'm going to be talking about an album which is very personal to me, the Velvet Underground and Nico, because that's the album I had on my headphones when I left my parents' house and started living on my own, and all those lonely nights I was listening to it on the radio. I was playing it on my guitar, the songs, and I just completely fell in love with this album. It's one of my all-time favorite albums. So to try and find out what the best version is, it's tough, and it comes with nuance. So I'm gonna share as much information on this quest with you as possible. First of all, I'm gonna lay out which versions I'm gonna compare, because the mono version is rather obscure. It was released in the US and in the UK in 67 and 68, and afterwards you can sometimes find a mono copy, mostly by accident. There have been 75 and 78 releases in which they marketed this as the stereo pressing, but the matrix numbers indicated it's actually the mono. So they wanted to release stereo, but by accident you could get a mono. Japan has released one in 97. There's a very limited issue from 2004, but there's also, and this is perhaps the most interesting reissue, and that's the one I'm going to be using, the one released by Sundazed in this box, the Velvet Underground box. It was mastered by the owner of Sundazed himself, Bob Urin, and it's actually sourced from the original analog reels. Now, I'm not quite sure if this is also a completely analog copy. There might be a digital step in the process, but he got hold of the analog mono reels for this copy. Now I can hold the copy up. Also, I know this box is somewhat controversial, yet it does go for around $200, so it's not a cheap box to find. It's controversial to the regard that the cardboard is a bit flimsy. Some people think that the cover for the 1969 sucks. The Velvet Underground, the self-titled album, people would have preferred the Lou Reed mix. And also it is marketed as a mono box, but for example the second album and the third album, they contain fold downs. The mono mix are fold downs. The mono mix from the Velvet Underground and Nico is the only dedicated mono mix the Velvets did. Yet, if you want a good copy of the mono, this box is the way to go. $200 is a lot of money, but if you want to get an original, you're far, far, far from home. I've seen them pop up in Europe 2 times. 900,000 euros. You know, those prices are the ones we're talking about. Here I have the Sundazed 2012 mono one in a very good condition. I've been using this one for mono. And for stereo, it looks horrible. The cover is beat up, but this is the 1968 German pressing, which some consider the best sounding stereo version. Why is that? Because this one uses the original stampers from 1966. You can see it on the matrix. Yet there are also some scribblings afterwards, so the Germans did do something with it. But some people believe that the German pressing quality in the German vinyl was superior in those days. Cover is all beat up, I'm aware of that, but the vinyl inside is somehow beautiful, and the quality is beautiful. And I compared it to a friend of mine who also has this specific pressing. Both sound equally great, and this has always been my go-to copy. So these are the sources I'm using. Now, let me start with a little bit of history about the mono and the stereo mix. There are some differences. Waiting for the Man and Run, Run, Run have longer fades out in mono. Femme Fatale has an echo effect in the mono. In European Sun, there is a cut at 1 minute, and in the stereo you can hear that more, and it's more seamless in mono. Then you have I'll Be Your Mirror, which is actually the same mono mix on both stereo and mono. So in the stereo you hear the mono one. Sterling Morrison has said something interesting. I believe it was in her biography about the mono mix. That is the only version where the band was actually present. So that is an extra reason to take a good look at the mono one. And it makes me wonder, why is this mono version so rare if that is the one where the Velvets were present? So Now let's start comparing this mono version. Um, Needless to say, all the instruments come out of one channel. It has a very clear, full sound. It is a deep sounding one, and somewhat this is the smoothest sounding version of the Velvet Underground and Nico that I've heard. Yet, and that is what makes this for me a rather tough comparison. This specific pressing, um, it's not pressed too loud, so I really had to crank up the volume to get it on the same volume as the stereo one. And even on the same levels, it sounds so much more thin. It is a very bright, good representation of the record in that regard. In the sense that it has a lot of nuance. It has, it sounds very clear. It is a very clear version, this mono one. Yet, when you compare it to the stereo, so I'm going to switch to the stereo now. The stereo one has its flaws, it has its benefits. It seems to me as if the person who was mixing the stereo one has been listening to the mono one very carefully. Because this is not a stereo version which has strange panning like you see with some Jimi Hendrix records or some Beatles albums or a lot of the stereo pressings in those days. No, as a matter of fact, the voice and the bass are centered in the middle. And the other instruments, they can change from time to time. So, for example, you have lead guitar left, rhythm guitar right, but it's mostly, it sounds like he really was listening to what makes the mono record pressing so good, and then changed a bit around with other elements. But having the voice and the bass so strong in the center makes for a very focused and nice listen. The frequencies seem about equal. The bass is just as present here as on the mono. These things can sometimes change, especially because the deep sound of a bass guitar can sometimes be better reflected in a mono mix. What I specifically like, and that's more a texture thing, is this does not sound thin. It does not sound as nuanced and clear as the mono one. Might be because of aging of the album, might be in the master. It's very tough to say, but it sounds, how do I say it? The stereo image is so full. It is very full and warm sounding, not at all as thin as the Sunday's mono does. And I really like the things they did in stereo. I really like it. I know that this was not the version where the Velvet Underground was present. That is the mono one. But I tend to put this on more often. I tend to be more involved. But that might really be an element of texture, of a full stereo image, of a nice rough presence. Yeah, there's a little bit more distortion on this one. And I really wonder if that's is it in the record? I'm not so sure. I've heard this distortion on other pressings, stereo pressings as well. So it might be that the mono master is how do I say it? More perfect in that regard. Yet if I have to make a choice, this is very full sounding, and that is my Achilles heel. If something sounds full, it does have a lot of detail as well. You know what? I'm gonna work towards a conclusion. Both pressings are impressive, but what I need, is a company like Analog Productions, who are actually working with Verve to make a good mono UHQR and a good stereo UHQR. And then the differences will not lie within the pressings, because I might right now make a judgment based on a good pressing, and this is a very, very full, awesome, all-encapturing pressing, while this is a more nuanced, balanced one. And my own personal choice in that regard is to go for full. Yet, I'm not disbanding this mono one. If you can find an early mono or stereo pressing, you'll be a very happy collector. Now, that's my review. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Leave a comment below, and I'll see you in my new video. Bye.